On the way to Vlieland, my tracker suddenly stopped working. I tried to get the system to start updating again, and I think it might work going forward. Up a little and was now coming from the direction I wanted to sail. The sun was out, but the air was still quite chilly. And yes, the tracker stopped working again. When I arrived in Vlieland, I was able to dock in a well-protected harbour. I only stayed for the night. Vlieland is a Dutch island in the Wadden Sea and part of the West Frisian island. It's known for its large sand dunes and peaceful nature landscape filled with bird life. I took a walk around parts of the island and noticed that it's very popular with campers. My next stop would be Muiden, another 55 nautical miles away. The sail to Muiden was fast and fairly uneventful, but the weather forecast showed strong winds approaching. A deep low pressure system was moving across the British Isles and would affect the Dutch coast, so it looked like I might be stuck here for a few days. Muiden is a Dutch harbour town on the North Sea, serves as the main gateway to Amsterdam through the North Sea Canal. Once the weather improved, my next planned stop was Scheveningen, a relative short sail. When I left Muiden, the wind was still strong, so I planned a short leg to Scheveningen, only about 25 nautical miles. I arrived in Scheveningen at the same time as the 44-foot dinghies RC44 came into the harbour. They have world championships here. There is a Swedish boat participating. I already expected I would have to stay here for a few days because of the weather. Scheveningen is a coastal town near The Hague, known for its long sandy beaches and its large pier. While staying here, I also had to do something rather unusual during the sailing trip. I had to visit the Spanish embassy. During my sail from Stockholm, my wife, who is from China, and I had applied for a visa to Spain. The process involved a mountain of bureaucracy. Now the Spanish embassy in Chengdu wanted me to personally show up at the Spanish embassy in Amsterdam to prove that I actually exist and that I really am sailing towards Spain where we plan to meet. So that resulted in 2 trips to Amsterdam before I could finally leave Scheveningen and continue toward Ostende, about 17 nautical miles away. On the way to Ostende, you have to cross the major shipping lane leading into Rotterdam. When you're crossing, you must do so at the right angle to the traffic flow and contact the traffic control authority beforehand. This is one of the passages many sailors warned me about before the trip, but on this particular day there was surprising little traffic going in and out of Rotterdam, so the crossing went very smoothly. The port of Rotterdam is the largest port in Europe and one of the most important logistics and container hubs in the world. Ostende became my only stop in Belgium. I stayed just for one night. The city is known for its fishing harbour and ferry connection to the United Kingdom. When I left Ostende, the wind was once again about 15 knots directly against me. My next destination was Boulogne-sur-Mer, about 55 nautical miles away. Along this stretch, you sail parallel to the main shipping lanes of the English Channel. I encountered large cargo ships roughly every 10 minutes. They lined up about 4 to 5 nautical miles apart. It's quite impressive to see how much cargo moves to and from Europe every single day. On the way to Boulogne-sur-Mer, I also passed a personal milestone. I had now sailed my first 1,000 nautical miles of the journey. At the same time, I could see the white cliff of Dover on the horizon. I arrived late in the evening and the marina looked completely full, so I tied up along a quay normally used for working boats. Because of the large tidal difference between high and low tide was a bit challenging. Normally you dock at the floating pontoons that rise and falls with the tide. Boulogne-sur-Mer is best known for having the largest fishing port in France. I left early the next morning and headed toward Dieppe, about 50 nautical miles away. The sail to Dieppe was fast. I reached speeds up to 8.5 knots in perfect wind condition. It was actually the first time in quite a while that weather weather was really on my side. I stayed only one night so I could continue southwest toward Le Havre while the weather window lasted. This was the second day in a row where the wind and weather finally worked with me instead of against me. When the wind increased to over 20 knots on Bean Reach, the boat really came alive. With the current helping me along, I sailed comfortably about 8 knots. This boat truly liked this kind of wind. I just stayed one night again to take advantage of the weather and then set course for Cherbourg, about 75 nautical miles away. Finally, I was tied up at the pontoon in Cherbourg. It was 11 p.m. and the last 5 hours had been extremely tough. I had up to 6 knots of current against me. I had simply missed the tidal change by a couple of hours, and that meant a lot of motoring. Cherbourg sits on a kind of blunt peninsula. When arriving from Le Havre, you need to round the northeastern corner before turning into the harbor. It took about 10 hours and roughly 60 nautical miles to reach the corner. The remaining 15 nautical miles took almost 5 hours, and they were brutal. When I finally arrived, I found a pontoon in the middle of the harbor without any shore access. It was completely dark, so I didn't even attempt to find a proper guest berth. My plan was to leave early the next morning anyway. The next stop was Roscoff, about 150 miles away. I left Cherbourg early. The sail to Roscoff is fairly long, so I expected to arrive the following morning. The wind was good during the day but would die out during the night. In the early hours I started the engine. I slept only in short periods. You constantly have to watch out for other boats that you may need to avoid. The most difficult ones are the fishing boats. Many of them don't have AAS, which means they don't appear on electrical charts. As I approached Roscoff, the engine suddenly started smoking and running unevenly. Toward the end, I could only run at the idle. When I finally arrived, I tied up at the outer end of a pontoon. I was exhausted and fell asleep almost immediately. Roscoff is a small French town with a picturesque streets and stone houses. Historically, it was sometimes described as a pirate town. Yesterday, the La Solitaire de Figaro for 2025 race arrived in Roscoff. The race took place from August 30 to September 27, featuring 34 to 35 solo sailors tackling a challenging 1,850 nautical miles course. Roscoff is also known for ferry traffic to United Kingdom, and every morning many day trippers arrive with the ferry. Eventually I managed to find a mechanic who could look at the engine. The problem was that it was low season. The few marine service places that existed had very limited opening hours. The only real engine workshop was closed for 2 weeks due to vacation. I didn't dare leave without having the engine checked. In the end, I stayed almost a month in Roscoff before the engine was fixed and that the weather improved enough for me to continue forward to Boulogne-sur-Mer. In the next episode, we finally get help with servicing the injectors, and even more importantly, my dear wife arrives from China.